So I welcome to you today to what I think is really the next discussion that covers this well, which is ensuring ethical and responsible gaming use in AI and gaming. So we need to navigate the tension between innovation and regulation. And I'm very excited to introduce you to a great panel who are going to talk about it from a legal perspective, but also from an ethical perspective. So here we go. Thank you.
I won't make the introductions immediately. I'll make the introductions one by one as I ask the questions. So, thank you very much, Nick, Brendan, Tanja, and Adriana. I'll introduce them one by one throughout the session. So, AI and gaming, there are obviously mostly advantages, as always, with technology, but there are also pitfalls that we have to focus on. But the interesting thing is obviously advantages are real advantages when it's an advantage for all the players in the particular industry. And with AI, there are massive advantages for players, massive advantages for the operators, and also advantages for the regulator. So having everyone happy is a good recipe for success. Without further ado, I'll start with Adriana. Adriana is Director of Compliance and DPO of Betsson, of the Betsson Group. She is a lawyer by profession, specialized in various regulatory and compliance issues, specifically data protection, intellectual property, competition, and internet governance, in a wide portfolio of innovative and data-driven industries. Adriana, how are gambling operators leveraging the use of AI to ensure compliance and improve customer protection?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for the nice introduction, and I'm really glad to be today here and that we can discuss this interesting topic. I think we already heard many points that probably we'll cover today, this morning. And yes, the gambling industry is definitely one of the industries that is very interested into the use of the AI, which comes naturally because being a regulated industry and coming in the era of the regulatory maturity that is happening now, the key competitive advantage is becoming the innovation of the companies. Since what we will see in the forthcoming year is the market will change drastically because the regulations are coming stricter and stricter. The cost of the compliance is becoming much more. And like as we see in any other regulated industry, we are having like a large, big operators, few of them, and the small one will definitely be the one that will need to focus on the innovation in order to maintain and sustain on the market. That's why I think AI will be the crucial, definitely competitive advantage for anybody who wants to stay in this industry, such as in pharma, such as in telecommunication, where we already saw this, and where AI is definitely taking a lot of space in the field of the innovation. We already mentioned some of the uses this morning, like customer support, like automation of certain processes, internal processes, but I think that definitely three, I would say, most important uses in the gambling industry for AI will definitely be responsible gambling on the first place, which Nick will explain a bit more because I know they are quite active in that area. Anti-money laundering, which, as you can see, we can see even the European agenda is very focused on that, given that many projects from Horizon are definitely looking for innovative solutions that will help law enforcement and make the partnership between the law enforcement and private companies in preventing and detecting different types of crimes. And gambling industry will definitely be one of the important partners in this field. And finally, I would say even the most important maybe for the gaming companies and their future commercial strategy and being the leader on the market is definitely customization in the field of the product and definitely in the marketing, especially given the a lot of marketing restrictions in the European market. I think AI will be the key, definitely, tool for us to manage, to leverage the advantages in the markets and to sustain on the market. So customization, tailor-made products, personalization, and marketing that will be designed per the user's needs will be definitely one of the key areas where operators will be looking. Of course, this is something that will be very interesting to see from the regulatory point of view, and that Brandon will probably touch upon a bit later, because there is a very thin line between personalization in gambling and pushing the customers on the other side, which is not maybe in line with the responsible gambling principle, and this is something that we will definitely need to explore in the forthcoming period.
Thanks, Adriana. So I'll move to Tanja. Tanja is also a lawyer by profession. We'll get you bored by the end of it, because we're all lawyers by profession except Nick. And currently head of legal of Acre, which is a technology company that operates in the iGaming and fintech space. Tanja has also a vast experience in her previous roles in advising clients in relation to online gambling and the fintech space. Furthermore, Tanja was mentored by me, so that should say it all, right? So, Tanja,
Yes,
how can the industry take advantage of AI technology responsibly to improve efficiency and reduce costs?
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for the introduction. Right. Basically, as Adriana said, and I think we can all agree, there will be a lot of repetition on what we are about to say. And yes, the main focus of all the operators, right, should be the reduction of costs. So if we're going to focus on that, where we're seeing the most costs, it's not just in the marketing strategies or in the products, but I would focus on the compliance costs. And the compliance costs from the labor point of view. And there, if we use the AI with respect to the AML and to not just detect fraud, which will be the best thing, but also to use the AI to detect any inefficiencies that are within the framework and within the models that the operator has, right? So preventing the inefficiency, which will lead to the regulatory penalties, right? So that's both from the AML point of view, from the responsible gambling point of view, right? So the AI should focus on reducing the player addiction, right? So monitoring the patterns of the players and preventing any addictive behavior. But in that case, that leads to the better reputation of the industry and the operator itself. And the last point that we already discussed as well is the marketing, use of the AI in the marketing strategies, right? So if you utilize it in a good way to analyze the products that you already have, to predict the future products and to predict the future patterns that exist in the industry, you're creating a really highly personalized user experience. You're also looking into creating more fair and enjoyable games for the users. But as Adri said, you have to find the right balance in the player retention and the regulation at the same time, without actually looking into the responsible gambling problems.
Okay, thanks, Tanja. Nick. Nick is, let's call him an industry legend and personality that has been in the iGaming world for very, very long, more than he would like to say, but also almost as much as me. So So Nick has a wealth of knowledge within the sector and now focuses his time in introducing progressive technologies into the sector for a whole host of applications, including compliance, AML, responsible gaming, and player protection. Nick, so we've heard how AI can improve customer protection and compliance. We've heard how it could improve efficiency and reduce costs. How can we obtain a better experience for the player through AI?
Well, through AI, Well, you've got two sides here. This is a good question. You've got two sides here. We are discussing also the distributed ledger, blockchain technology, as well as AI. And they do go sort of hand in hand, in my personal opinion. Now, how you're going to create a better experience for the player is the frictionless and the personalisation,
The age.
Yeah, indeed. The frictionless and the player engagement from the AI tools, because we've spoken about the personalisation, we've spoken about the real-time bonusing and being able to tailor the bonus to meet those player requirements and their likes and their needs, and this is all using sort of AI technology. You've then got sort of on the distributed ledger, the immutable ledger, the time stamping, which we can start to use for other aspects, and this is where we can start to go into sort of the player protection and education with the player, so that the player will be more loyal to your brand, and you can reach out and touch and educate the player in a positive way, using sort of behavioural monitoring. And this is what, another side to the player experience, in that you're monitoring the player against themselves and utilising the algorithms, the machine learning, the AI. It all comes under the same umbrella, in my opinion. So that if you can now sort of educate the player to remain and play within their entertainment zone, their affordability zone, their sustainability zone, not only do you get more loyalty, you also get more wallet share, and it's now proven, because we have the data, that you actually get a longer lifetime value from that particular player. They don't burn and churn so much. So it really does improve the player experience, 100%, because it's frictionless, you're tailoring something to meet their requirements, and yet you are also protecting them by utilising the progressive technologies that are available there in the marketplace. And it exists today, as we've heard.
Thank you, Nick. I saved the best for last. We have the MGA here. We have Brendan, who's a lawyer by profession as well, and has been working with the MGA for the past 7 years, where he currently occupies the position as Deputy Chief Regulatory Officer, overseeing regulatory function of the MGA. He's also heavily involved in matters relating to innovative technology, with particular focus on blockchain. So, Brendan, Malta's probably the most forward-looking and open-minded regulator in Europe, and possibly one of the really top ones in the whole world. In a conference we were together in Napa Valley a couple of months ago, there was a regulator who said, "We don't care about cryptocurrencies, we don't need them." And that is actually the same mentality that many regulators in Europe had about online gaming 20 years ago when I started. And ultimately, that is what's wrong with the mentality of regulators that do not embrace what's happening, what's going on. Because, yes, you cannot care about them, you're just putting your head in the sand, but in truth, you are ultimately trying to keep your eyes bended to avoid seeing the reality. So, back to the question. So, what are the threats? Since you are a forward-looking regulator, you always embrace technology, you always try to look into the next big thing and try to create a framework for it. What are the threats that you have identified when embracing technologies such as AI? And what are the steps you're taking to mitigate those threats? I'll come to another question afterwards. Let's start with that.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So I think that, to start off, whether regulators choose to embrace AI or not, it has already proven to be a game changer in many industries, including ours, where essentially we have been riding on the AI wave for years now. But when approaching tech, I think that regulators should always be mindful of certain concerns. And in the case of AI specifically, I think that these have largely manifested in ethical concerns, namely relating to notions of fairness, transparency, bias, and privacy as well. But speaking from a regulator's perspective, something which I'm always cautious about is the treacherous pitfall of over-regulation, which, yes, regulation can definitely come from a good place, but it can have negative effects, leading to essentially denying the benefits that come with innovation. But so the question remains, how should regulators approach the threats that come with technology? And in the case of AI specifically, at least within the local gaming context, I think that the threats which I've mentioned have been largely addressed by means of the overarching gaming framework, where we have certain principles which essentially guide operators in terms of what they can and cannot do with the technology. For example, AI cannot be used in order to target vulnerable groups and possibly exacerbate problem gambling. To the contrary, in our case, we actually have an obligation on operators to use the technology to identify problematic behavior. As I mentioned, transparency is also very important, and this is reflected in the way in which we engage operators to understand the data sets that they're using to train AI models, but also question what they're doing with that data. But on a more general note, something which we have found to work is adopting a tech-neutral approach in order to allow a certain degree of flexibility to our operators in terms of selecting the technology that they want to use and implementing it in a way which best fits their operations. But at the same time, coupling that with a risk-based approach where we focus our attention in those areas where regulatory intervention is most needed, since they would pose a higher level of risk. But yeah, essentially, to conclude, I think that AI is here and it's something that won't go away. And as the regulator in the gaming sphere, we plan to continue on leveraging on these strategies, which I've mentioned, in order to ultimately stay relevant as a regulator and continue striking the delicate balance between innovation on the one hand and, of course, achieving our own regulatory objectives on the other hand. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Two more questions, but the first one, I would like to open it for everyone to answer. So this morning, I for my sins, I was an examiner for a dissertation and a master's in biomedics. You'd ask, how the hell can a lawyer be an examiner in a master's for biomedics? And ultimately, it was about gambling addiction. And one of the things that came out of the study that the student has done, fantastic dissertation, is specifically how some bad actors in the game, because we always talk about gambling operators that are properly regulated, that are ethical, but there are some bad actors in the gaming industry that are, for example, making use of AI in order to see the patterns of the player. And one of the main, from this dissertation, what came out is that one of the main reasons why a person keeps on playing is because there's this element that affects the mood. So the fact that you're seeing yourself win will give you the courage to continue playing. Mm-hmm. If you had to lose all the time, then obviously at one point in time you'll say, I'm done with this. But the fact that you have this sort of winning once in a while will give you the courage to continue playing. But what he's focusing on is these new games that are coming from mostly outside of the EU that involve an element of skill, which in truth is not really completely skill. And through that part of the game which is based on skill, so it is a gambling game, but then around it you have this sort of bonus feature that allows you to play this game of skill, sort of, and because of that game of skill, you can win extra money. And the distribution of the prizes in that part is actually coming not through an RNG determination, but rather arbitrarily. And they are using AI to see the patterns of the players and actually make them win at the right time in order to keep them playing. Now, I don't know if this is something widespread or if there are only a couple of cases of this, but how concerning is that, and that is in general, but also how can a regulator, and this is specific to you, Brandon, how can a regulator make sure that this is being monitored properly?
Shall I start?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that it's always important, of course, to have the necessary expertise from the regulators end. But of course, we recognize from our end that a certain level of expertise lies with the industry as well. So we engage a lot with multiple professionals, including from the academic side, to actually understand different models and ultimately learn in order to implement not just regulation, but best practices from our end to achieve certain goals, including, of course, player protection, which is the cornerstone of any gaming framework. But in these cases, again, it's important to have certain teams which ultimately monitor operations. And from our end, we have a very dedicated, responsible gaming team, which, apart from carrying audits, actually carries out familiarization visits with our operators in order to understand what they're doing. And before we take any action from our end, we make sure that we know ultimately what's happening and understand the operations that are being carried out by our operators. So I think that it all boils down to making informed decisions in this case, and not jumping the gun, and as you said, just precluding both operators in order to gain access to certain technology, but also the players themselves from benefiting from the tech itself. So yeah, that's the approach that we have opted to take in terms of engaging with our operators, engaging with the industry, and ultimately base our policy on the feedback that we've gathered from the industry. And this is something that for example, is reflected in the way in which we approach blockchain, where prior to the rolling out of the DLT policy that we have recently issued, we took the time to engage with the industry, carry out extensive consultation, and also set up workshops in order to sit down and have discussions with the industry. And if we identify certain areas which merit regulatory attention from our end, since again, they would pose a higher level of risk, then yes, we would definitely step in those cases.
Any comments?
Well, yeah.
In brief, but because I still have another question for you.
This is addressing the regulated markets. You know, how are we going to sort of address the black and the grey markets and those operators that start to utilise this progressive technology for their own gains? And they don't care about the rules and the regulations. They will develop content. And a lot of this stems from, dare I say, console gaming, where they're educating minors to gamble at a very young age and bringing them through so that you've got game content providers that are developing content that is gamified around console gaming. And if you start to then target the illegal, the black market with these types of games, you're going to encourage a lot of, dare I say, the younger demographic to those sites to play those games. So this is where we have to be very mindful and quite cautious about how the technology develops, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Tanja, short comment, or? I saw you
but the thing is that what you mentioned is that these games are being developed in unregulated markets, so it's extremely difficult to monitor those. I mean, within the regulated markets, you can just assess whether or not they fall within the regulatory framework, and then you assess the supervision and the enforcement of the rules. And you can't foresee everything that's happening, especially with respect to AI. But as Brandon was mentioning before, within the regulated markets, we just need to pay attention whether or not we're going to over-regulate the industry and then just push them further towards the black markets. We're actually doing this.
Okay, so my last question to you all, and this is, so there's this organization, the Future of Life Institute, which published a policy paper asking for AI laboratories to pause for 6 months the development and the training of AI systems. that are more powerful than ChatGPT-4. So they said, okay, we reached ChatGPT-4, stop now. Like, do not. Is this a technique for businessmen like Elon Musk? Because he's one of the signatories, I believe, to this, that fell behind to catch up? Or is it a genuine, legitimate concern based on the threats posed by AI? So is this in self-interest, or they really care about us all?
Can't really answer that, right? Because, I mean, from one end, Elon Musk is not really my favorite person, so I'll answer this question first. I mean, you can see it's like there is a definitely cause for concern, because it could be that our ability to actually assess the consequences of AI and in these models is definitely not in line with the development of these models as well. So we won't know what's happening. I mean, Elon Musk is a supporter of this, so you can't really know whether or not this is because he's developing something that we don't know about, or that he's not the industry leader in AI, or whether he's just privy to the information that we really don't have and we can't have, so he has more concerns than we do, and he's literally trying to do a good thing.
It also goes back to what Angelo was saying in the previous panel. You know, guns don't kill people, it's people that kill people with guns. And it's the same, like if you teach the model to do something, it's going to go and learn and do something inappropriate or bad. So, yeah, and it goes down to, you know, Pandora's out the box. It's already there. So who's developing what? We simply don't know. And, yeah, whether Elon Musk is developing something in the background, behind the scenes, we have no idea. But the thing is, the box is open, the genie's out the box. We just now have to embrace it, and hopefully it doesn't get into the wrong hands.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Adriana?
Yeah, well, my personal opinion, I think we need to accept the fact that we are definitely living in the different era of the technological revolution. We cannot wait anymore for the legislation to catch up with the innovation. We just need to learn to operate with the existing legal framework that we already have, and we already have very good principles that are in very basic like legal framework, just we are not utilizing them in the proper way. And we need to learn that when it comes to the technology, we need to deal with the principle-based legislation. We cannot expect anymore to have strict rules for everything, because then we will definitely not being able to follow up the technology. We need to start adopting principle-based legislation, and we already have a lot of these instruments even today. We need to apply to the different types of the technology in order to be able to practically understand the different implications. Yes, there will be always certain areas which will require a bit stricter technical standards, but then we are not talking about the different types of the technologies. We are talking about the different uses of the technology in the different areas. And we are talking about already regulated industry, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's food processing. Just now we have, of course, some new risks that came with the technology, and that will be always like that. Just we need to accept this idea, just leveraging what we already have and using it instead of putting on hold the technological development to catch up with the legislation, because I don't think that will work in that way.
I think what Brendan mentioned before you continue, Brendan, having this principles-based approach in regulation is probably the best way to tackle this continuous and fast-moving technology innovation. But Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that GPT-4 has done an amazing job at sparking our collective imagination by showcasing, on the one hand, its vast potential, but at the same time, raising certain concerns. But a ban, even a temporary one, I don't think it's something which is practical or realistic. I like to imagine stepping in front of a moving train and trying to stop it with raising both hands. It's simply not realistic and won't work, especially when considering the amount of investment that has been pumped into the technology, and also the fact that the ones calling for this ban are the ones that are most financially invested in it. So yeah, let's also not jump the gun and treat GPT-4 as some sort of general or super intelligence, as Angelo mentioned. we've come a long way, no doubt, but we're still not there yet, and we still have time to prepare. So I would personally use this time to continue researching AI safety and coming up with principle-based regulation policies and also codes of good practices in order to address these risks. But a ban on AI development, even a temporary one, is not personally the road that I choose to take.
I think we all agree that having a gaming regulator with this forward thinking and really open-mindedness is a breath of fresh air, especially if you guys deal with foreign regulators. You'll realize that this is something we should really, really cherish. Thank you very much, everyone. It was, in my opinion, an excellent panel. Thanks to you. Round of applause for our panelists. And enjoy the rest of the show.